Hi, everyone. Welcome and good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you're tuning in from. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of essays and memoir. We'll be hearing from David Linebarger reading from Tennis Players as Works of Art, released on December 3rd, Cynthia Cook reading from What Really Happened to the Hat and the Glove, also released on December 3rd, and Gardner Landry reading from Songs of My Father and Other Essays, releasing on January 14th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/book. I'm also going to put the link to each book directly in the chat for everybody. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting David, Cynthia, and Gardner today. We'll start off with our first reader, who is David Linebarger. After leaving a career in music, classical guitar, due to injury, David earned a PhD in English at UC Davis before becoming professor of humanities at Northeastern State University in Oklahoma. His publications include scholarly essays on Wallace Stevens and modern music, poems in over 30 journals, and two small collections of poetry, War Stories and Bed of Light. A nationally ranked tennis player in his age group, his recent nonfiction writings on tennis and art have appeared in Kajibi and Another Chicago Review. In Tennis Players as Works of Art, which is what we'll be hearing from today, David creates a beautiful collection of art that reimagines how we view some of the biggest names in tennis. Each short piece in this collection is creative, lyrical, insightful, and occasionally surprising. Through his narrative and the artist's vision, readers will discover a new lens through which to view tennis, a sport elevated to the realm of cultural and artistic significance. Now let's welcome David.
Hey, hi, everyone. You see me on the screen okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to read 4 short pieces. They're all short. They're all different. Every piece is a little experimental, and each one is accompanied by a work of art. On the first one, there's the work of art by Lady Pink. She's our first lady of graffiti, and this is Serena Williams. Sometimes I write on the art and a tennis player, sometimes just a tennis player. So Lady Pink paints Serena Williams. It's not just a boys' club. We've got a sisterhood going. Lady Pink. Badass. That's what I say to my daughters. That's what they say to me. We repeat it for emphasis in hushed tones, reverence. Serena's a badass. Diva of high notes, fashion, built like a brick house in tight black leather. Her powerful body in a leopard skin dress as it prepares to pounce on a weak second serve. Badass. She serves almost as hard as half the men, and with accuracy, placement, disguise. How many women pitch in the big leagues? That's what Serena's serve is. Who cannot love her much maligned father? Every day, his children had to fill an empty page with reflections, thoughts. Here are some of Serena's notes to read to herself during matches. Attack the short ball. It's waiting for you. You are black, and you can endure anything. Endure, persevere, stand tall. You are part of the strongest people alive. Nothing is worse than what your grandparents and great-grandparents went through. Nothing is more difficult. Nothing. Get up, get out, and make yourself, your people happy and proud. Who could possibly bring such thoughts to life on a tennis court? Thank you, Richard Williams. Thank you, Oracene Price. Lady Pink, the first lady of graffiti, paints Serena against a pulsating background of bright, cool, lipstick loud colors. These are not delicate scrolls of rococo seashells in living rooms of decorative grace, but half spirals, whorls, lines of female creative energy, self-expression, political rebellion, always remembering self-expression for a woman, especially a woman of color, is a politically rebellious act. The crown placed deftly atop Serena's head as a female descendant of the crown's Basquiat bestowed upon his male boxers and musicians who were role models of self-expression and self-determination in the Black community. Now Serena wields her racket like Muhammad Ali, his mouth and fists, Charlie Parker, his lightning sacks. Be yourself, move forward. That's what I hear Pink's portrait shout, though not quite as loudly as one of Queen Serena's primal screams on court. The old rules of exclusion were made to be broken. Joy Harjo, our current poet laureate, provides the cautionary, celebratory tale. Crucial to finding the way is this: there is no beginning or end. You must make your own map. Okay, that's on Serena. This one's on Pete Sampras, and this is by a digital artist from Russia, Sam Brennan. And this is on Pete Sampras, and Nirvana is the title. And I link his career to Hinduism. Pete Sampras in Nirvana. Remember your first funeral? Pete put his first Wimbledon trophy in his coach's casket. Earlier, he broke down and cried between points in games in the 1995 Australian Open quarterfinals against Courier before somehow winning the match. Tim Gullickson, brain cancer, gone. Each grain of salt vanishes, becomes the cosmic ocean. Hinduism 101. The problem in Hinduism is that this essential truth lies hidden beneath a magical yet deceptive illusion of surfaces, Maya, that deceives us, distracts us from understanding. The problem for sports fans when contemplating Sampras was much the same. Pete's tremendous competitive will, the strongest willed athlete I've ever seen, Paul Annacone, lay deceptively buried beneath the veil, the veneer of a superb classic athlete, someone who made everything look easy. His all-court game, his running forehands, his gift of history's best big clutch serve. On fast courts, especially, his opponents were dispatched too easily. Spectators grew bored. The headlines, cruel. Sampras with a bunch of Z's. Sampras would put you to sleep. How many are awake enough to see beneath life's surfaces? How many might be enlightened? The answer in Hinduism is that everyone will be. Just give it enough time. enough lifetimes. Okay, so that's Pete Sampras in Nirvana. Everyone's different. This one comes from a chapter I worked with an Australian artist from the University of Melbourne. Every 3 months, he gave me a new painting from an Australian tennis champion. And it featured a body part, Rod Laver's ear, Ken Rosewall's mouth, Lou Hode's nose, Pat Cash's legs, and then I'd write on it. This one is called Jelena Dokic's eyes. And that's his painting. So I get it. And I spend about 3 months trying to figure out what to write. And so this is that one. In junior tournaments, Jelena is ruthless, unemotional. She even cheats on line calls to avoid her father's beatings. He smacks her in the head with shoes, punches her in the stomach. He wraps her many wounds in words of love/ambition, prostitute, whore, hopeless, worthless. Jelena's only 12, keeps rising in the rankings. Fear of punishment works. When I painted this work, I thought a lot about her relationship to the game and her father. I was interested in the way she stared back, waiting to receive the ball, waiting to receive a question at a press conference, etc. Mark Shorter. Like Jimmy Connors at the US Open, the 187th ranked Jelena is rocking the stadium in a string of upsets on her way to the quarterfinals at the 2009 Aussie Open after years of on-court and off-court struggles. After another big upset of a highly ranked opponent, she confesses on court, "I've been to hell and back." And this next paragraph has quotes from Kierkegaard's retelling of the Isaac and Abraham story. So when Abraham is taking his son Isaac to sacrifice him, right, to kill him. And I'll raise my hand when those portions come up. So second paragraph. Every day, Sarah watched Isaac and Abraham from the window as they went down the valley. At 13, 14, 15, 16, Jelena is yelled at and whipped, kicked, and hit like a mistreated animal. Abraham climbed Mount Moriah. Jelena Dokic, only 17, and in the semifinals of Wimbledon. But when Isaac saw Abraham's face again, it had changed. His face was wild. His whole being was sheer terror. Listening in the car to Jelena's no-holds-barred autobiography, Unbreakable, I lift my hands from the steering wheel to kill her father, to kill all those fathers who deserve to be killed. Then I gather myself and finish the drive home. After losing in the semifinals at Wimbledon in 2001, Jelena's father abandons her in the clubhouse. She has nowhere to go, nowhere to sleep. History's eyes raise questions. Bodies hit the ball back with all their might. Okay, and then one final very short one. This one's a sort of aesthetic beauty piece. This is the painting by Brooke Hunter, and it's called Justine Henin's Backhand Music of the Spheres. I watched Justine in slow motion, the transfer of weight from back to front foot, the coiling, uncoiling of the legs, the hips, the shoulders, the core. Is it true she did 1,000 sit-ups a day? Justine's one-handed backhand, the most beautiful shot in tennis. John McEnroe. If all life could be as anticipated yet unexpected, if all life could be so powerful yet loose, free flowing, if we could somehow record all the spectators' sighs in the world stadiums the moment after, if we could record all these sighs, apply the Zen of John Cage, the minimalism of Steve Reich, the ensuing music would be as sacred as Palestrina's a cappella masses, as mysterious as the sound of whales. Okay, that's the book.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you for showing us those visuals as well. Obviously, that's such an important part of the book. So that was fantastic to get those. Reading next today is Cynthia Cook. Cynthia's first written work was in market research in engineering in sales. She has written many papers on subjects including taxonomy, entomology, plant diseases, and landscaping as an advanced master gardener at Van Dusen, Vancouver. This is Cynthia's first nonfiction novella. She's written from personal experience about the impact Alzheimer's can have on the person affected, their closest relatives, and their caregivers. So, in What Really Happened to the Hat and the Gloves, the mystery entirely depends on who you ask. As the story unfolds through multiple perspectives, readers are drawn into a web of conflicting memories, half-truths, and heartbreaking realizations. With each chapter, the lines between victim and perpetrator blur, challenging our understanding of family, trust, and the devastating effects of dementia. Cynthia, take it away.
I wanted to introduce my reading by quoting my favorite band, The Cure. I leave you with photographs, pictures of trickery, stains on the carpet, and stains on the memories, songs about happiness murmured in dreams. We both of us knew how the end always is. Chapter 1, Marion. I'm a wealthy single woman who has lived independently until recently. I have owned homes in Vancouver, Toronto, Gambier Island, Salt Spring Island, Squamish, Brackendale, and Park City on Vancouver Island. I have 2 adult children, a son, Shane, and a daughter, Rhiannon. I have no grandchildren. I was tall, 5 feet 8 inches, but now I'm only about 5 feet 4 inches. My hair is gray and shoulder length. I have lost a lot of weight since I moved to Park City. I recently moved in with my son Shane and his partner Sunshine to a new, larger home in Park City. I am no longer able to live independently. My memory is impaired. I can't keep track of time. I'm constantly anxious about where my keys, credit cards, purse, and passport are. I don't know where my mother's diamond ring went. I never used to drink before, but the consumption of white wine has become my coping mechanism. I have mobility problems. I have poor vision due to cataracts, especially at night. I'm lonely, and sometimes I think that it would be better if I just died. I can't do most of the things I used to enjoy anymore, including quilting. My travel is limited. I trust almost nobody now. I only have one sibling, Candace, who is 5 years younger than me. She is married to Paul, and they live in Burnaby. She has one surviving child, Charles, who resides in Vancouver. Candace has no grandchildren. My sister is still in good health and exhibits no sign of mental decline so far. Candace is the same age as our mother was when she died of a massive stroke. Candace and her husband came to stay at my house in Park City right before I moved in with my son and his partner. They were there under the guise of helping me and Shane, but Candace's real agenda was to take advantage of me in order to get a pair of gloves that were hand-beaded by our maternal grandmother. Candace said she wanted them for Charles, but instead, my sister took them home to their apartment where she displayed them. The most unforgivable act committed by Candace during her stay with me was the deliberate destruction of Sunshine's hat. It was done with willful and malicious intent to hurt Sunshine and Shane, and it did. My son had stopped by my house to discuss a few details pertaining to the move to our new shared home. Candace asked Shane about the hat and what the large plume of fur on it was. Shane told Candace, "It's Sunshine's hat, and the fur came from her deceased dog, who was irreplaceable to her." Candace told my son that she was glad she had asked him about the hat and to please return it to Sunshine, which he unfortunately didn't do. Later that night, I saw Candace beside my banker's desk near the hat with a pair of scissors in her hand. I can't remember why I didn't ask her what she was doing or why Paul didn't stop her. 2 days later, Shane returned to my house to take me to get a manicure and pedicure. My son discovered that the large plume of dog fur had been cut off to about 2.5 inches and disposed of, although he didn't find it in the trash. Sunshine was devastated by her loss. To make matters even worse, Candace and Paul have steadfastly continued to deny any knowledge of or wrongdoing to the hat, despite the obvious fact that they're the only ones who could have done it, because I'm an eyewitness. When Paul met with Shane, only Paul, because my son won't see Candace, 2 months after the fact, Paul refused to admit that they were both lying. Candace and Paul have continued to try to win back my affections by sending me a blanket featuring photographs of our children when they were younger, taken on family vacations to Disneyland, and pictures of friends visiting the vacation home I owned on Gambier Island. Of course, I want nothing to do with either one of them after this betrayal. I refused to give Candace my new telephone number because she took the gloves under false pretenses. Candace hasn't even returned the photographs and memory book she borrowed from me as she promised. To think that Shane and I once said to Candace, "It would be so nice if you and Paul lived nearby in Park City." Sunshine doesn't want Candace to have our telephone number because of what she did to her hat. My son, Shane, has unfriended them both, and he has stopped replying to Paul's messages. I'm going to skip forward to chapter 5. Finn. Finn is Marion's son-in-law. I've been married to my awesome wife, Rhiannon, for 2 years, but we met 5 years ago. My wife is fearless and beautiful in an unconventional way. She often wears streaks in her hair in her favorite color, purple. Rhiannon has several tattoos, which all have special meanings. I have lived in the Caribou my whole life. My mother was widowed young, so I have supported her as much as possible. Rhiannon has a great attitude and sense of humor. We have lots of fun living with many rescued dogs and a cat. I have gotten to know my aunt and uncle since we all partied together at my wedding. Candace told me how much their son, Jeremiah, would have loved to be there. I replied, "Thank you for accepting me. I hope that I get to meet Charles someday because we're about the same age." Chapter 6, Charles. Marion is Charles's aunt. I live and work in Vancouver, where I'm assistant program director at a museum. My degree is in original works, so I still perform in, write for, and direct theater part-time. I'm happy in a long-distance relationship. I have no children. I'm the only surviving child of Paul and Candace. We lost my brother, Jeremiah, 9 years ago, the same month I graduated from university. He never had the chance to have children, so Paul and Candace have no grandchildren. I'm an unconventional person. I have short, chestnut-colored hair. I'm 5 feet 6 inches tall with a slim athletic build because I ride my bike everywhere. I look like my mother did when she was young. My parents have always supported me in everything I've done and have been proud of my accomplishments. The first thing they did when Candace got her inheritance was to repay my student loans. My brother and I attended private school in Vancouver, even though it meant that my parents both had to make personal sacrifices. My happiest childhood memories are of the times my brother and I spent with my parents, my Aunt Marion, and my cousins, Shane and Rhiannon. Jeremiah loved his Aunt Marion and his cousins very much. There are portraits of us together taken at my aunt's Salt Spring home. We have informal pictures of us, which were taken at our summer cabins on Gambier Island and on joint family vacations in Disneyland during happier times. I had dinner with my parents last night at their apartment. I'm now in possession of my great-grandmother's hand-beaded gloves, which I recognize as original Cree artwork. My parents had taken them off their apartment wall when allegations were made by my aunt that my mother had acquired them fraudulently. I have never known either of my parents to lie about anything. In fact, my mother is brutally honest. I have never witnessed my mother senselessly destroy anyone's property or take anything without permission. I guess I won't be seeing my cousin Shane anymore. I'm sorry that I didn't see my Aunt Marion more often while she was still lucid, but at least I got to say goodbye last Christmas. I hope that I can stay in my cousin Rhiannon's life and that someday I will meet her husband, Finn. And here is what really happened to the hat and the gloves.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and for really getting us into the story with that in the background. So I'm putting the chat for I'm putting the link for the book in the chat one more time here. Our final reader for today is Gardner Landry. Gardner graduated from the College of Arts and Science at Vanderbilt University in 1985 with a Bachelor of Arts in English, magna cum laude. He spent many years in branding and marketing communications before his novel, Merlin of the Magnolias, was published in 2021. Songs of My Father and Other Essays is his first nonfiction collection. Gardner is a native Houstonian. In Songs of My Father and Other Essays, Gardner welcomes you to the world of his father, Fred, and gives a glimpse into his youth. Gardner assembles relics of his writing from an earlier era that harken to even earlier times, stretching from childhood into his adult years. It's not a big book, but it packs a punch and it entertains from cover to cover. We'll hear more now from Gardner himself.
Thank you, Hala. Am I on? I guess I am. Okay, great. Thank you, Hala. Okay. Okay, this is one essay and it's called Mayonnaise, and it's from the new book, the first part of the new book. So it starts with a little quote, which I'll read, and then I'll move into the essay. Um, Narcissists I've known have had unusual eating habits or appetites, including eating match heads, dry cake mix, chicken bones, raw meat, dog kibble, egg mash, bits of paper, wood pencils. Some binge or gorge on ordinary foods. Others seem always to be on one or another self-imposed, self-invented, eccentric dietary regime. From Narcissistic Personality Disorder, How to Recognize a Narcissist by Joanna Ashman. Although my father's proclivities in eating changed a little through the years, there was a constant accompaniment to every lunch and dinner and most breakfasts. So unvarying was the accompaniment of mayonnaise to every meal that my father referred to the unctuous white goo as the staff of life. My father grew up in Louisiana and loved the Creole foods of his home state. His father taught him how to cook and make sauces, and he passed that knowledge on to me. I still make a flat omelet that was one of his weekend specialties. My father's father also taught him how to make mayonnaise, but ultimately, a store-bought version of this amorphous foodstuff would fire the culinary imagination of Fred. At every meal, a full-size jar of Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise was always within easy grip of his right hand, next to his water glass and/or icy glass of Tab. And the application of it went far beyond the conventional spreading on a sandwich or a cracker. Mayonnaise for my father was a ubiquitous binder, a kind of basic component that, in combination with other sauces or alone, provided an unwavering theme, a gustatory drone string in the symphony of Fredish gourmandism. Blended with A1 or Heinz 57, it was the perfect complement for steak. Mashed into black-eyed peas and formed into the consistency of a paste, it became a grayish, brownish, whitish amalgam, ideal for the surface of a saltine cracker. And it had to be Hellmann's. Kraft was just not acceptable. At a restaurant, the worst faux pas a waiter could commit was to bring a dish of Miracle Whip instead of mayonnaise. Fred would crinkle his nose, look down at it, and turn down the corners of his mouth in disgust, just thinking about Miracle Whip. "It's sweet," he would intone as he cringed. Yes, Hellmann's mayonnaise was important. And one of the fun facts I recall from a childhood cross-country driving trip to California was that Hellmann's mayonnaise was called Best Foods mayonnaise on the West Coast. This revelation made California seem all the more exotic and beguiling. And so, on arrival in the Golden State, one of our first stops was to buy a jar of Best Foods mayonnaise, which was duly passed around the car so that the label with its Hellmann's colors but different name could be inspected and admired. On another family trip, this time through South Louisiana, we passed a roadside sign that read St. Landry Parish. In later years, my father would often refer to St. Landry as the patron saint of mayonnaise. So even from his mayo-smeared perspective, he could discern that his affinity for the thick, slick slather was on the extreme side. At one point, I think it was sometime in the 70s, one of his nephews informed him that the Götterdämmerung of Hellmann's mayonnaise was imminent. Yea, Hellmann's would be produced no more. This newsflash induced immediate and complete existential panic in Fred. Without a moment's delay, he descended on area grocery stores, stocking up on case upon case of Hellmann's mayonnaise, which he guarded zealously in a makeshift post-mayonnaise apocalypse storeroom far in the recesses of our house. This was mayonnaise wartime, after all. Cousin Rick, ever the deadpan prankster, had succeeded in one of the better practical jokes that could have been played on Fred, and I did not learn it was a joke until decades later. No doubt thoroughly pissed off by the trickery, Fred, with his former anchorman gravity, immediately launched an intra-family public relations campaign to inform my sister, my mother, and me that he had received the news regarding the imminent demise of Hellmann's mayonnaise, from highly reliable sources, but that, albeit these sources had been credible in the past, there had somehow been a miscommunication, etc., etc. Anyway, he insisted that he had been prudent in stocking up, given the information upon which he was relying, and we accepted this report as the truth and moved on. Some 20 years or so after the incident, I learned that a good laugh was had by many outside my immediate family unit over Cousin Rick's fabulous Doomsday for Hellman's practical joke. A few years ago, before a family Thanksgiving celebration at my aunt's house in the Texas Hill Country, my parents and my aunt and a few others were eating at a Mexican restaurant that got high marks from the denizens of the cedar-sprinkled hills of Kerrville, Texas. The picante sauce, known as salsa to many throughout the United States, was a bit harsh for Fred, and although this restaurant was considered quite good, he was dismayed at the prospect of consuming such a fiery condiment. But then, eureka! A Klieg light blazed in his culinary imagination. Sorry about the sirens outside, y'all. He remembered the small to-go packets of Hellmann's that he always carried with him in his coat pockets and promptly ripped them open with the vigor of a skydiver pulling the emergency cord of a malfunctioning parachute. Recounting it to me later, he said, "So I mixed it with the hot sauce," dramatic pause, and exultantly cocking his head and gesturing dramatically with his right hand, he intoned, "And it was just perfect." Mayonnaise, the healing elixir, had mollified the otherwise overpowering Mexican food and had elevated it to a level of Fredish gastronomic ethereality. How was it that these packets of Hellmann's mayonnaise found their way into his pockets, you may wonder? On every trip to a fast food or takeout restaurant, he'd raid the condiments bar and greedily stuff his pockets with little mayonnaise packets, ensuring that he kept an ever-available stockpile of Hellmann's on his person, in case of mealtime emergency, like the one at the Mexican restaurant in Kerrville. The thickening of his arterial walls, although a constant preoccupation and frequent topic of conversation, never caused him the least pause for reflection regarding his mayophilia. Such was the priority of what he referred to as the staff of life in his daily dietary regimen. In fact, no one in the family paid much attention to dietary modification in the face of serious health issues. My aunt was in town for a heart-related vascular procedure, and cousin Chris and his wife Donna were in Houston too. So we all decided to have a family dinner. The meal of choice, chosen with absolutely utter unself-consciousness, was chicken fried steak, which everyone, my aunt included, devoured with insouciant relish and single-minded abandon. One weird thing, there was no mayonnaise near the chicken fried steak. Perhaps the blending of mayonnaise with cream gravy was too reprehensible even for the mayonnaise king of Tanglewood to abide. The previous episode happened when I was in my young adulthood, but in later years, Fred's mayophilia increased, and he began to spread mayonnaise across a world of cuisines. On one side was the entire varied panoply of international and/or ethnic cuisines, and on the other was the reliable monotone of Hellmann's mayonnaise, proffered a la Fred. Just think, for instance, how well a glob of Hellmann's would work at bringing under control the spice of a fiery lamb vindaloo, were it whisked deftly into the dish's sauces by the accomplished mayonnaise mixing hand of Fred. My father recounted to me one of his great multicultural Fredish fusion conquests that involved a modicum of culinary warfare. He and my mother were dining at a neighborhood Chinese restaurant. The waiter brought the food to the table and retreated to a nether corner of the establishment. Before diving into the little red pork ribs and egg rolls and mugu gai pan, Fred's tabletop laser vision found its mark in a saucer of Chinese hot mustard. You know the stuff, the super fiery condiment that one is obliged to mix sparingly with the sweet sauce to render its extreme piquancy palatably appealing. Well, as I said, the offending overspiciness of the mustard drew Fred's attention as if his gaze were a heat-seeking missile homing in on an Al-Qaeda safe house. And immediately after he had acquired and locked on the target, He said he shot his arm across the table, grabbing and quickly retrieving the saucer of hot Chinese mustard. He related that he then produced a couple of emergency mayonnaise packets from his sports jacket and began to whisk their contents into the East meets West, or really East meets Fred, dipping concoction. This foray did not play out without consequence. A waiter who was lurking in the shadows in the corner of the room was, according to my father's account, not as disinterested in the goings-on at my parents' table as his distance from it might have suggested. On catching sight of the lunchtime sauce fowl, the bewildered corner-lurking waiter burst from his clandestine monitoring post and sprinted directly across the room to the Fredish tableside. And then, again, according to Fred, here's how the interchange went down. Fred: "So the waiter comes running over to the table and says," Fred trotting out his best right off the boat Chinese waiter accent, "No, you cannot do that. It is against our restaurant policy." And then Fred recounted his reply with the verbal swagger of an old-time packet-toting Texas mayonnaise slinger. "So I told him, screw your policy. This is my policy." And when he related how this exchange played out, he seemed supremely self-satisfied, as if he had established yet another national ethnic beachhead for the global Fredish mayo mixing juggernaut, proving that not all moments of the fusing of cuisines were happy meetings. As in the larger world of affairs, some culinary shifts were the result of victory and defeat in battle. The showdown at the Galleria area Chinese restaurant was surely a prime example of this less than amicable dynamic. Nevertheless, doggedly undeterred, Fred continued intrepidly to prosecute his relentless pan-cultural mayonnaise jihad, refusing rest until an entire globe full of cuisines was covered with great globs of Hellmann's mayonnaise and whisked into Fredish culinary nirvana. I think it a fitting coda to this reverie to indulge in a digression on how my father pronounced the word mayonnaise. It used to irk and amuse my grandmother, my mother's mother, to be fair, who was from Oklahoma, not exactly a beacon of haute cuisine, that Fred always called mayonnaise mayonnaise. I think it was a corruption of the French pronunciation of mayonnaise, bastardized, since my father's grandfather, with his mayonnaise thick French accent, forbade anyone in the family from speaking French. Anyway, Fred always called it mayonnaise, and in retrospect, I think his pronunciation of the dense condiment was thoroughly appropriate, for mayonnaise was truly and thoroughly his, the constant mealtime accompaniment, the great mollifier of the piquant, and binder of disparate foodstuffs and textures, the all-purpose fungible blending agent that provided continuity and thick dimensionality to the daily dietary regimen of my father, who, though he lived most of his life in Texas, never relinquished his romance with the sauce his father taught him to make so many years ago in the Pelican State. If there's a chapel or meditation room at the Hellmann's mayonnaise plant, I'm considering asking them to hang a portrait, or at least a photograph, of my father spreading his self-exalted food product, the apex of the Fredish food pyramid, on top of a crisp saltine cracker in one of its apses, side chapels, or alcoves. That's it.
Thank you so much, Gardner. And once again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, of course.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, perfect. So at this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question, go ahead and drop those in the chat and I'll make sure they get. We do have a question already to start off the Q&A for all three authors. This question is, what do you hope your book inspires readers to learn and or do after reading? So I'm thinking we could go in reading order. So David, do you want to start us off with this one?
Well, as far as tennis is concerned, think more broadly about tennis, and then I mean, there's a lot of music and art, and those are my my great passion. So, my someone I know just read a piece on Medvedev, and it was on Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, and she went and listened to Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony afterwards. So, anytime you do that, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the smallest things, I think if you're inspiring a change in direction for a reader, I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Cynthia, what about you? What do you hope your book inspires readers to learn or do after they read?
Well, I'd like to raise awareness about Alzheimer's and how it can affect people and family members who are trying to be supportive. And if they find themselves in the situation I find myself in, I just want them to know that support is available through the Alzheimer's Society, because I I didn't have a handbook for this, and I didn't know where else to turn when I needed direction. And this is definitely a resource you can and should go to if you need help.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know there's so many kind of questions about that, and it's still so murky for a lot of people. So
Yes.
I think that's wonderful to be able to try and provide a resource for people. And then Gardner, what about you? What are you hoping your book inspires readers to learn or do after they read your book?
Well, I guess they could learn more about narcissism and personality disorders. Uh, Also, let's see, what what else I wrote here. If you were raised by a malignant narcissist, you are not alone. To know that you're not alone. Uh,
Yeah.
what to do? What to do? Read more about it, learn more about it. Be glad you survived the toxic narcissist who, in my case, um, had a cluster of traits that Jordan Peterson calls the dark tetrad personality. So if you survive that and you're still alive, that's something to celebrate. So, you know, go have a glass of champagne, I guess.
Absolutely. Sometimes we got to celebrate the small wins, right?
Yeah.
Or even the really big ones, the really hard ones. We've got another question for you, Gardner. This is
Oh,
from Ray. What did this book do
oh.
for
Thanks, Ray. What did it do for me? That's a good question. Uh, it allowed me to get some of this stuff out of my system because it was just pent up for so many years. And, when you're raised in the house of a toxic narcissist, uh, you, uh, you're not allowed to, you really don't have a voice. You're just tamped down. One of the deep narratives, and I'm writing about this for the next book, that my dad had about me was, Gardner's not allowed, not for any reason, just not allowed to do whatever. So, uh, I guess that I hope that, I think it allowed me to speak finally, I guess.
Yeah, I know for so many writers, especially of nonfiction and memoir, that's what's so powerful about writing. It allows you to express your voice. Um, so I have here another question. This is for David. Can you talk more about the art in your book and that collaboration process?
It's a lot of work. Um, so there are 45 artists in the book, and I didn't start looking for art, but then as it went on, you know, I taught a lot of art when I was a professor, and so I got a piece, and I had someone, draw things for me for free, and then I started looking around and saw someone else, and then I commissioned some work, and it just went on and on and on. And then I started, writing on the works, and I kept reaching out, and it was a you know big deal, contacting artists all over the world. And all of that, then back and forth, and then the pressure of writing on their art, right? Then you have something, you write on their art and you're going to show it to them. And that was all, I haven't written on art before, but now I have. And so it was just a lot of work, but I will always look forward to collaborating with people again. It was a great joy. It was a great joy.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm always excited to hear about inter-artist collaboration. So I think that's such a enlightening thing to hear about. This next question, this is for Gardner from Buddy. Does 2412 Kensington Place make an appearance in the book?
Thank you, buddy. I was just actually typing the answer to that in the chat, so I'll just say it instead of type it. It doesn't make an appearance in this book, but it sure might make an appearance in the next one. So folks, that's in reference to the old Sigma Newhouse at Vanderbilt. So that's what that is. It might in the next one. Yeah.
Future cameo, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah.
This next question is for Cynthia. If there's one thing you wish you could tell yourself before you were presented with the experiences you wrote about in your book, what would that one thing be?
Probably once I've reached the decision to go no contact with someone, I should stick with that. Um, I I thought my sister was no longer capable of doing terrible things to me, and I was wrong. And that's the biggest and hardest lesson I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. This next question, this is for all three authors. Are you planning to continue writing? And if so, what is your next project? Cynthia, I see you nodding. Do you want to start us off with that one?
Sure. I've almost completed what really happened to Marion and Candace. In other words, the story of a relationship between two sisters. And just that I would really like to have an opportunity to make peace with my only sibling for my own sake as much as hers.
Absolutely. Another kind of
Yeah.
exploration of that idea,
Yeah.
concept. Gardner, what about you? Are you planning to continue writing?
Yes, already am working on the next one. So and it's more nonfiction, more essays. Um Dealing with it's not going to be in the same kind of ridiculous comic voice that most of these are in this one. It's going to be a different tone with a different tone, dealing with some darker stuff about Fred and then also dealing with Houston and New Orleans and the relationship between Houston and New Orleans, and also dealing with the different types of narcissism. My grandmother was what Chris Reese calls a covert Christian narcissist, and Fred was obviously an overt uh, narcissist. So I think of Fred's style of narcissism is even though it was terrible, it's it's easier to deal with because it's right in front of your face. My grandmother's style was very cloaked and much more sophisticated. And if I can think of objective correlatives for each type, I'd say I think of Fred as the buffoon narcissist, or the court jester at best. Um, Whereas my grandmother was the snake. She was really cool, waited to strike. She really was a different level. I mean, if Fred was maybe a private or a corporal in that army, and she was a general. or an admiral.
Yeah, so a lot of exploration in the next project, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll have to be on the lookout for sure.
Thank you.
And yeah, of course. And David, closing us out, are you planning to continue writing? And if so, what?
Like Gardner, I've written at least half of the next one. I've been working on it. It's on, I can't decide whether to call it composers or musicians as works of art, but it's short prose pieces on pieces of music. So writing about music is like one of the most challenging things, but I'm trying to do it. And this is, you know, my first passion was music. So I love the study and I love the challenge of, you know, trying to write on something I can't write on and just revising and revising and reworking it. So yeah, I'm excited about it. It's been fun.
Yeah. So this is really exciting. It's a lot of work that's continuing in veins that all three of you have already begun exploring. And I'm so excited to hear what comes next from all three of you. For now, I do also want to say thank you so much to David, Cynthia, and Gardner for being generous with us and their work, their thoughts here. And thank you to everybody in the audience for being here with us as well to help us celebrate these wonderful authors. Don't forget that you can order Tennis Players as Works of Art, What Really Happened to the Hat and the Glove, and Songs of My Father and Other Essays from the links in the chat. I'm putting all three of them in there one more time for everybody. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it for tonight. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.